I'm Isabella, 28, and for 6 years I paid. Medical bills, truck repairs, the roof, whatever kept us afloat, I paid. I thought generosity meant belonging, that love sounded like receipts. At Dad's 60th, Mom smiled and started slicing. Not steak, me, with jokes about money and being single. Each laugh nicked deeper, turning celebration into quiet humiliation. When I gave Dad his watch, her face finally hardened. She leaned across Crystal and dropped a sentence that detonated us. Face this with family? Tell me in the comments. What she said next rewrote my life forever. Growing up between Tom and Gary was a permanent halftime show. Tom was the captain. Gary was the charm. I hustled. Mom praised touchdowns and jokes. My A's earned careful, clipped nods. I learned early that approval had fine print and conditions. Numbers felt safe. They didn't roll eyes or move goalposts. I chose finance like armor, promising nobody would struggle again. After school, I worked the diner, saved tips, studied nightly. Dad's company faltered. Bills whispered late, closets skipped new clothes. First call came junior year. The truck died on Highway 6. I wired $500 from textbook money and swallowed pride. Soon it was deductibles, co-pays, and that creeping mortgage shortfall. Every ask was temporary, urgent, and somehow never the last. I lived small so our problems could live a little larger. Studio apartment, 10-year Honda, discount groceries, overtime whenever possible. At holidays, I picked up checks while jokes picked at me. Mom's compliments arrived with claws. Focused, but not naturally gifted. Tom was leadership. Gary was sunshine. I was dependable, replaceable. Being indispensable meant being invisible whenever laughter took attendance. At 22, I became the solution and lost myself quietly. Raise came, requests multiplied, and thank yous shrank into obligations. I told myself sacrifice was love, and love was duty. Friends booked weekends. I booked double shifts and wire transfers. I learned birthdays by balances due, not by candles counted. When praise arrived, it was measured, qualified, and backhanded. Must be nice, Mom said, smiling like a sharpened spoon. Single, no responsibilities, she'd murmur, tallying me against my brothers. The ledger I kept wasn't numbers. It was dignity and sleep. I passed up furniture, vacations, dates, bought everyone else breathing room. I became the family ATM, approved without a PIN. Every transfer whispered, maybe now they'll see me, finally. But attention arrived only when the account balance needed rescuing. I should have known love measured in invoices would bankrupt me. I didn't know the bill coming due was my belonging. And the collector was waiting at Dad's birthday table. I thought sacrifice meant love. She would prove it meant leverage. 6 months before the dinner, Dad clutched his chest. Blocked arteries, urgent surgery, bills taller than the mailbox. I emptied savings, signed a loan, and kept working. Weekends became groceries, pill boxes, laundry, quiet check-ins. Mom watched receipts stack, gratitude flickering, then slipping from her face. When he stabilized, she fretted about turning 60 properly. Nothing fancy, she said. Let me handle it, I answered. I booked a private room that held the city gently. I called the manager, ordered flowers, chose Dad's Cabernet, gave the server my card early to prevent scenes. The point was joy, not guilt, never another ledger. I bought the gift weeks early, the watch he admired. Blue dial, steel bracelet, dignified for the years he's carried. Not to outshine, to honor the man who tried. Work surged. I took extra projects and said yes. 60-hour weeks stacked like bricks beneath a humming life. I slept in fragments and kept covering the gaps. Mom's comments sharpened as the date drew close. Must be nice, she'd murmur, auditing choices with her eyes. Single, no responsibilities, a refrain in housekeeping tones. I told myself it was stress with clumsy manners. That once candles glowed, she'd soften and we'd exhale. I set place cards, checked allergies, arranged seating by temperament. Dad's color returned. The blazer I bought fit kindly. Tom's kids built napkin tents. Gary told half-finished stories. The first barbs came disguised as budgeting advice and care. I suppose when you're single you can be generous, she said. Tom laughed. Gary chimed in. I let them pass. My promotion surfaced. She salted it immediately. Money isn't everything. I swallowed the defense. The night belonged to Dad's survival. I poured wine and watched Dad's smile widen. Then the table tilted, just a degree, and my stomach noticed. Cake arrived. We sang like we could rewind time. I slid the velvet box across, voice warm, hands steady. He opened it. Time behaved gently for both of us. The bracelet clasped, the blue dial caught a breath. Too much, he whispered. I said love sometimes weighs more. That's when she watched the watch longer than anyone should. Not at him, at me, calculating like a judge. Her mouth curved into something not smile and not mercy. She leaned across Crystal. The storm finally reached our table. I thought I could hold it together with planning and grace. I should have known. The sentence she delivered would break the table. She didn't toast the watch. She measured it like evidence. Her smile thinned, and the room leaned to hear her. Isabella always thinks money makes her right, she said lightly. Throws cash around, then expects applause for being generous. Laughter tried to form and died somewhere near the wine. Dad shifted, fingers grazing the new bracelet, suddenly uncertain. Tom stared at his plate. Gary studied the city lights. The server froze mid-step, a statue balancing sparkling water. Mom leaned closer, pearls clicking like a countdown in her throat. You're buying affection, she added, voice dipped in sugar and steel. If you knew love, you wouldn't need such expensive proof. The sentence stung, but the wound was still survivable. Then she exhaled, relieved, as if truth finally had permission. You're not even part of this family, she said, smiling. Not shouted. Worse. Conversational. A correction. A minor housekeeping note. The air went thin, so thin the candles flickered. Somewhere behind me, silverware chimed like a tiny alarm. Sarah's hand flew to Emma's ear without breaking eye contact. Jake stopped mid-giggle and folded into the quiet suddenly. Dad's mouth opened, then closed, then opened, language abandoning him. I heard my heart beat through glass, through linen, through oak. 6 years marched across the table in orderly, unforgiving figures. Deductibles, roofs, trucks, tuition, prescriptions, holidays paid by silence. Every receipt turned into a witness, every transfer an alibi. I remembered wiring money from a dorm with flickering lights. I remembered overtime stitched into weekends like hidden seams. I remembered being thanked like a clerk, not like a daughter. How generosity becomes choreography when no one learns new steps. Not part of this family, she repeated, gentler, nearly tender. Like she was finally setting me free from my imagining. Like belonging was a sweater I'd borrowed without permission. The cruelty wasn't volume. The cruelty was the paperwork tone. The room waited for me to crack or apologize or bargain. Old me would have smoothed plates, changed subjects, paid dessert. Old me would have translated insult into logistics and solutions. But something steadier stood up inside me and took roll. I looked at Dad first. His eyes said, I'm sorry. I looked at my brothers. Theirs said, don't make waves. I looked at Mom. Hers said, I finally said it. And mine said, I finally heard you. Clearly, completely. If I wasn't family, an entire economy collapsed in place. No more emergency lines. No more midnight wires. No more rescues. A life without invoices masquerading as love appeared. Possible. Relief and rage braided together like rope in my chest. I lifted my glass, not to drink, but to steady. The crystal was cool. My voice would be cooler. If belonging could be audited, I would balance the books. And the next thing I said would change our ledger. Her words had shattered me, and also set me free. What I said next would redraw every line between us. I wasn't finished breaking the spell that broke me first. And the bill for all of it was finally due. I set my glass down and let the silence breathe. If I'm not family, I said, stop asking like I am. I didn't raise my voice. I raised the lights on facts. 18,000 for surgery, I said, steady as a metronome. 12,000 on the mortgage over 2 anxious years. 8,000 for Tom's car when the bank called. 6,000 for Gary's classes he never finished. 4,000 for the roof. 3 for the winter furnace. This dinner, 350, you called it showing off. No one moved. Even the candles practiced not flickering. Tom swallowed. Gary counted costs like beads in a rosary. Dad's hand hovered near the new watch and trembled. You keep track of every dollar, Mom whispered, testing shame. Yes, I said. Because money was the only language here. I sent love in the only form you allowed. If it never read as love, I'm done translating. I lifted one finger. The server drifted like tide. Remove my card, I said. Bring my check only. Gary's chair scraped. Come on, he said. Family. Family didn't claim me, I answered. A minute ago, remember? Sacrifice became vanity the second it stopped being useful. Tom cleared his throat, measured me, and said, You're overreacting. I reacted 6 years, I said. This is action. Dad found words, careful as glass carried over tile. Isabella, don't leave me to hold this mess. You were never meant to carry all our weight. I'm sorry, he said, the watch catching candlelight. I softened, but I didn't surrender the new boundary. I love you, I told him. That won't pay this bill. Love without respect keeps overdrawing what I can't replace. I'm choosing peace that doesn't charge interest every month. Mom tried for mercy, or at least its practiced costume. I didn't mean it, she said. You know me. You meant it, I said. You just hated the math. Belonging stopped where the balance stopped. You taught that. Checks arrived, neat rectangles dividing the evening honestly. I placed cash for mine, extra for the trembling server. Happy birthday, Dad, I said. May joy outlast invoices. I stood. The chair exhaled. My legs remembered being mine. Mom reached and caught air. Old choreography missed its mark. Please, she said, don't abandon your family tonight. I'm not abandoning, I said. I'm refusing to abandon myself. At the door, I turned once and finished the accounting. I'll help again when love arrives without strings or ledgers. Outside, the night felt lighter than anything inside that room. I drove home without crying, surprised by the shape of relief. My studio looked the same, but it finally answered to me. I poured a glass of wine and didn't check my phone. Voicemails stacked. Apologies, bargaining, panic, old choreography, begging encore. I let silence do what money always failed to do. The next morning, I booked Hawaii. Oceanfront, spa, first class, unapologetic. 10 days later, I watched waves erase footprints without asking permission. Back at work, focus returned like muscle remembering its form. My boss noticed. Projects grew. My raise arrived without leverage. Therapy taught me the word I'd avoided, parentified. I'd been the safety net. I'd forgotten I was a person. Mom sent a letter months later, ink softer than her voice. She named resentment, jealousy, fear. She didn't ask for money. I can't undo it, she wrote. I can learn different. I believed the effort, not the tears, and kept my boundaries. Dad called from counseling, voice steadier than it used to be. We're learning new rules, he said. I'm learning to hold them. Tom budgeted for the first time. Gary took a full-time job. Without my deposits, everyone finally made their own. When Mom got sick, I visited as a daughter, not funding. We talked carefully, then honestly, then like two people rebuilding. I was wrong, she said. You were never buying love. You were showing yours. I nodded. Mine now includes myself. Family dinners returned with receipts split and expectations retired. I helped when I chose to, not when fear demanded. Love stopped sounding like wire transfers. It sounded like respect. Peace stopped being expensive. It started being possible. Have you ever faced something like this? Tell me in the comments. If you've been through this, you're not alone. You're not. Subscribe for more stories of truth, boundaries, and becoming whole. I didn't stop loving them. I stopped abandoning me to prove it.